Well, all right. Hey, the time is officially 8:29, so might as well get started. And good evening to you, Prathesia, and for those of you who will be tuning in later this week, um, watching this recorded session, welcome. It's week 4, and we're just going to kind of jump right in. I think based on the feedback I heard from several of you, walking through these worksheets was really, really helpful. As well as giving you a sneak peek of the multiple choice questions at the end was also very, very helpful. So we're just going to kind of follow that format from here on out. And without any further delay, let's just get right started. Let me share my screen with you.
Okay.
And this week we had 2 chapters to cover in the reading, and so chapters 4 and 5 is where we're going to dig in. And let me get to the right page. All right. Question number 1 is, what is Berit? And again, the page number has already been provided to you. And there's a good working definition here on page 92. I can't think of anything I would like to add really at this point, other than to say that in the reading, go to page 92. Here's another question from the same page. Question number 2, describe the stipulation of the Adamic covenant. In other words, what does obedience or disobedience to the covenant rule represent? Okay, so the Adamic covenant, of course, referring back into Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, God is in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. He makes a covenant with them. And the stipulation, of course, is you can eat from any fruit, any tree in the whole garden, except for this one tree. You will not eat, right, from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's the only negative part of the covenant that God makes with Adam and Eve. And then the book just talks briefly at the bottom of page 92 about how says this at the bottom: if humanity would simply acknowledge the innate authority of the Creator, would recognize that they were tenants and stewards in God's garden, and not the Creator themselves, they would live in paradise forever. But if they had to have access to every part of the garden, if they had to be free to choose their own rules and decide for themselves what was good and evil, if they had to be autonomous of the authority of the great king, then they would die. So what does the obedience or the disobedience of the covenant rule represent, right? Get into that a little bit, but I think in terms of life and death, it'd be obedience equals life, and disobedience equals death. All right. Question number 3, read Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And according to the author, why was Genesis 1 included in the Bible? What questions does it answer? Here we go. I'm going to check out the bottom of, page 93, all the way Yeah, all the way to the middle of page 95. And yeah. Yeah, and so we see then Genesis 1 really is, the author talks about Genesis 1 being a grand introduction to the entire Old Testament. And so everything that happens after Genesis 1 is getting into specific details of how God, how Genesis 1 plays out through the entire narrative. And so she says, in the middle of page 94, she says, I believe Genesis 1 was written to provide a lens through which to read the rest of the Pentateuch, or the rest of the 5 books of Moses. Penta, 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Since the Pentateuch is the backbone of the entire Bible, ultimately, Genesis 1 serves as an introduction to our faith. Right. Gap theory. What is gap theory? Here we're picking up in some different concepts, beginning in page 95. Talks about some different theories regarding what a week is in Genesis. In Genesis 1, in the biblical text, over and over again, it says God created, then God created, and there was evening and there was morning, day 1, and then it starts over again, day 2, there was evening and there was morning, day 2. So gap theory is described on pages 95 and 96, and then that kind of just moves right then into the next theory, the geological era, on page 96. These are, and I think we'll get to the next one even. So we're moving into framework theory, and each one of these theories describes different Christian understandings of the 7 days of creation. So geological era, and then finally, okay, so then you can go into page 97. What's the biggest issue with these? What's the biggest problem with both of these theories? And that's just stated right here in the middle of the page, saying the biggest issue with these theories is that they attempt to interpret Genesis by asking questions that the author could not have possibly, basically, the author didn't intend to ask these questions. They don't have answers. So what's the biggest problem with these theories? It's really simple, and it's something that we probably could spend hours talking about, is and I'll try to type it out this way, the gap and geological theories attempt to answer questions the original author never intended to ask or answer. Okay, it's really clear in Genesis 1, and that whether you believe that Moses wrote the book of Genesis, or if you believe that it was the compilation, or several authors, several people wrote Genesis, and whether you believe, it doesn't matter who you believe wrote it. One thing's really clear: they're not they're not interested in answering the questions of, well, did dinosaurs exist during this time, right? There's no mention of dinosaurs. It's not the author's primary concern. The author's primary concern is explaining and telling everyone who created the heavens and the earth. And so the how is addressed as well. God speaks in Genesis 1, and when God speaks, incredible things happen. And so we see that every time God speaks, something is created. And so, again, those are kind of two simple examples of questions that I think the original author asks in Genesis 1. Again, one of the biggest problems that we see, and we want answers. I understand that. I understand that we want to ask questions and we want to search the scriptures for answers as to, well, how was that literal 7 days of creation? Was it something else? What about the dinosaurs? What about, all of these questions regarding the origins of life in the universe? But the ancient person or the ancient people who wrote these things down were not interested in answering those kinds of questions. But we are very much today. So, you can talk more about that in this text box for question number 6. Just talk about the issues with these two theories. In a space, I wonder if it means. Anyway, okay. It says to sketch the arrow on page 100. Okay, I think there's a little typo here. But in a document, so describe the framework theory on the following page 99. What is the framework theory? And then also provide a description or provide a drawing of the arrow on page 100, labeling its parts, just understanding the 7 days of creation. And notice how in that arrow, days 1, 2, and 3 are listed on the top, and then it has counterparts on days 4, 5, and 6. So, hey, good evening, and hey, welcome, Sibby. Glad to have you. And so on page 100 for day and night, then on day 4, it's partner, it's pair. There's a sun to rule the day and a moon to rule the night. On day 2, the waters above and the waters below is paired with then day 5, where birds then rule the heavens and fish rule the seas. And God gives the command to be fruitful and to multiply and fill the domain in which these creatures inhabit. And day 3 comes along and the land and the vegetation is produced. And then on day 6, at the beginning of day 6, before humanity is created, land animals are created, and then humanity. And so the command is to let the land produce living creatures in vegetation. And then kind of over all of the 6 days of creation is then the Sabbath day, the jewel in the crown, if you will. And so the Sabbath day, God still rules on the Sabbath day. God rested, but God is still in control. And says in the Genesis 2:2 that the heavens and the earth were completed, and God rested, and God blessed and sanctified the 7th day. So when you can describe that in your own words when it comes to this question number 7, or you can draw it and try to upload it. I know that can be a bit of a challenge to try and draw something. It might be just easier to describe the arrow, in the pairing of the days 1 and 4, 2 and 5, 3 and 6, with day 7 as the at the point of the arrow. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. You're still with me. Good deal. Question number 8. What does the author suggest is the primary intent of Genesis 1? Okay. There are probably a number of directions you could go. I'm going to see if I can kind of direct you in the textbook a little bit more. This probably goes back to question number 3, really. So going back to pages 93 through 95. Will help you answer this question regarding the intent of Genesis chapter 1, serving as an overall.
Page 102, the second paragraph, it says something about the primary intent. You think this? Can we use that too?
Yeah, and can you tell me what page that was?
102.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good.
And then on page 103, that first paragraph, it still says something about it.
Oh, sure. Sure.
You see what I'm talking about? Okay.
Good. Thank you for that. Just kind of moving right along. A couple of pages we talk about the Sabbath. Such an important concept for Christians to learn, especially people I know. And it's true for even my own life, just sort of that struggle with Sabbath and resting well, being intentional about not working for an intentional period of time. The textbook does a really nice job of getting into the background, Genesis chapter 2 and the creation of Sabbath, and as well as tying it then to Exodus chapter 19 and 20 and the 10 commandments, the fourth commandment, the fourth commandment being to Sabbath. So you can see page 105 as indicated here in the worksheet. And then just as a little additional reading, read Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And you may want to talk about not just simply saying, well, it's Jesus. Okay, we get that. we know Jesus is the last Adam. But talk also about what makes Jesus the last Adam. How did Jesus become the last Adam? Or in what way? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay. The second worksheet for apply number 1, I have here as well. And let's see here. Let's just scroll down. This one's a little bit longer, 16 questions. Getting into some really interesting content. And so chapter 4 was all about God's original intent in Eden. And then chapter 5, we're getting into, again, it's kind of, the chapter title is God's final intent. And so God's original intent, God's final intent are same. They're one and the same. What began in a garden in Genesis ends in a garden city in Revelation. And it was really interesting to me. The one thing that really stood out in this chapter that I really appreciated is that Adam didn't stay in the garden long enough to start building. If Adam had stayed, if Adam had stayed longer, eventually he would have gotten into the building process. And we see then, of course, in Revelation, the New Jerusalem is, and God is dwelling once again, as God dwelt in the garden with Adam and Eve. God is once again dwelling with his people. There is no temple for God to dwell in, because the city of God is the temple. And so really fascinating chapter, and there's a lot to absorb from the reading. And so we'll just kind of jump right in here and go through these 16 questions. But chapter 5 starts out by talking about a couple of important details. We talk about the cherubim, trees, and rivers. And so we talk about the context in which cherubim appear. And we've already been talking about the Garden of Eden, but we also see then cherubim appear when Adam and Eve are sent out from the garden. So we see in Eden, there's the first appearance of the cherubim, as well as then the cherubim who are seated, or they're constructed in the top of the mercy seat in the tabernacle. And and then well, a number of other places as well. You're going to see that again in the temple, in the construction of the temple. And you can read about the cherubim, pages 119 through 124. All right. On page 122, then there's some modern descriptions regarding the cherubim. What are some of those? How have modern scholars interpreted the descriptions regarding those cherubim based on see that there are some correlations with other ancient cultures, and so see in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Canaan, they're presentations of enormous, intimidating creatures with wings of an eagle, the face of a man, the body and the feet of a lion or a bull. Their bodies have been interpreted by scholars as pointing to, quote, the union of the highest powers, speed, strength, and sagacity. I don't know how to pronounce this. It's tough for me to say. Sagacity of the human and animal kingdoms. And so you can read about that at the page on the bottom of page 122. And then you can get into the function then of the cherubim. What was their purpose? I kind of lead you down this road already because they are intimidating. And so pages 123, 123 and 24. Talking about divine guardians, protectors. Okay. What significance then does the river have in Eden as well as in heaven? Talk about the river on page, it's not long. Page 126 and 127.
Oh, I see it now.
Yep. And so you can check that out right there. That's next question. How does John, that is John the Revelator, how does John portray heaven in Revelation? And that's right on the heels then. It's on page 127 and following. John essentially talks about a garden city.
Garden City.
Yeah.
Up under that New Jerusalem. You talking about right there?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. Yep. Yes, you are correct. Yep. Okay. And then here, question number 6 on page 129. What is God's final intent for humanity? It's subtitled right there. God's original intent is his final intent, right? To dwell. I like how she says this. God never had any other plan, right? His goal was that the people of God might dwell in the place of God, enjoying the presence of God. That's such a memorable line. The people of God might dwell in the place of And I think there's some interesting conversations to be had too, a little bit further down on the page. She says, in my years in the classroom tell me that at this point, right, readers or students are asking, well, wait a second, then where is heaven? if heaven is where the people of God dwell in the place of God, enjoying the presence of God, then where is heaven? And she said, heaven is the same place it's always been. And I don't know where that is. It's where God is. Wherever God is, that's where heaven is. And that's where you want to be. Specifically, heaven is the place where the people of God dwell in the place of God with full access to the presence of God. Anyway, it's I think that's a good thing to discuss, and we may very well have time to do that this week, because it kind of this description, I think, is creates some tension with if you ask 100 people what is heaven or where is heaven, you might get 100 different answers. And so it's worth talking about and engaging the biblical text on the concept of heaven. So anyway, question number 7, the Bible teaches us that blank history did not happen in one blank. This is on page 130, and you can fill in the blanks here. And so it's taken word for word out of here. Let me see if it can help guide you. The Bible teaches us that the redemptive history did not happen in one fell swoop. Rather, God has been leading humanity. Excuse me.
Let's go in now.
Rather, God has been leading humanity back to Eden by means of a sequence of steps, a series of rescues, and a series of covenants. And then get into Noah's covenant. What kind of covenant was Noah's covenant? And let's turn the page here. Let's see if I can nail this down. So this is page 131. Page 131. Noah's covenant reestablishes contact between Adam's race and Yahweh, or the Lord, and it speaks to all of creation. Thus we'll speak of Noah's covenant as a cosmic covenant. And then there are two components, then just kind of jumps right into the covenant with Abraham we talked about last week. So hopefully that's fresh in your mind. But there are two components. Again, we're still on page 131, and you can see that just right in the middle of the page there. There's a promise of land, and then also the people or offspring. So both people and a place are promised to Abraham. And then we get into the Mosaic covenant, the law, the covenant of Moses, to bring the people that had been missing since Eden. So what did the Mosaic covenant bring to the people that had been missing since Eden? And here, going to be on page 132. So
Does it start on 131 and go to 132, or just?
yeah, there's a little bit at the bottom there. Yeah, a little bit at the end of page 131, mostly 132. I'll just say page
David.
132. Okay. Then and then also on page 132, it jumps right into then summarizing the covenant God made with David. And what is redemptive history about? That's a good question. On page 133, there's a diagram talking about the trajectory, or you might want to say it this way, the expansion of redemptive history. And it begins after Eden, right? The redemption story. It begins with one man, followed by one family, one nation, the nation of Israel, right? Through the Mosaic covenant, and then finally the one church, the one church of Jesus Christ, for once again all people. In what two ways are we guilty? Well, this kind of comes at the end of the chapter, pages 134, 135. And then again, what two ways do we need deliverance? I think it's the same pages. One 134 and 135. Yeah.
What two things?
Yeah. The guilt comes from because Adam.
It's like we are guilty because of our forefathers. Number 13. It's like middle ways in the middle of 140.
Right.
I mean 134. Yep.
I'll just delete that. And then the deliverance part, two parts. We need a representative to stand in for us to make a different choice. And second, we ourselves need to make that decision as well. So This is where we're getting into the first Adam, the second Adam.
Yeah, it's some ice.
Yep. Jesus' success at resisting temptation and choosing to sacrifice for us on the cross accomplished what two things? There's a lot you could say here, and certainly feel free to elaborate. You don't have to just say what the author says, but at a minimum, the author talks about proving that the first Adam. It says that when God takes upon himself the wrath, he did two things. One, he proved that the first Adam could have succeeded in his charge by, refraining from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And two, Christ, he bore his own body. He took on the curse of Eden so that God's children would not have to. And then, of course, when he rose from the grave, he conquered death. And when he conquered death, he conquered the curse. Conquered the curses from Genesis chapter 3. So there's a lot of things you could talk about there, and you can choose which of those things you'd like to elaborate on. And what did Jesus's resurrection accomplish? Oh wow! Hopefully, you could write pages and pages and pages. But all you need is a few sentences about what did Jesus's resurrection accomplish. So. All right. Any questions about that before we wrap things up with the multiple choice section? Anything? Just soaking it all in?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, let's go back to week 4 here and give you a sneak peek then of what to expect for the weekly evaluation. Okay. And again, I don't always know how many questions there are until I actually open it up and take a look. So here we go. So there's 6 questions this week. And again, I'm not here to give you answers to these, but I'm okay with letting you see them ahead of time. And so you can go back to this video later during the week in order to prepare for these questions. Question number 1, one iteration of the gap theory suggests, and you choose the best option here. So go back to the gap theory section of chapter 4 and note, is the answer, there are 2 creation accounts. Is the gap theory that Satan fought God in Genesis 1 verse 2, or Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, or sin entered the world when Adam sinned, or none of the above? Question number 2, early Israelite cosmology, their view of the universe. So the ancient Israelite cosmology suggested that there was water under the Earth's surface, there was water in outer space, water was chaotic, all of the above, or none of the above. That's a good question. Really like that question. Question number 3, the ultimate curse in response to humanity's sin in Genesis chapter 3 was the serpent lost its ability to speak, the woman has reproductive responsibility, the man must work, humanity was driven from God's presence, or all of the above. Be careful on this one. It's not that the serpent lost its ability to speak, but but choose wisely amongst the other options. The cherubim, chubby little angel babies. They guarded the presence of God. They fell from heaven with Satan, had the face of a man, the body of a bull, or had the body of a man and the face of a bull. Choose the best one there. Next question. The New Jerusalem is also known as heaven, is a recreated Eden, is inhabited by God's presence, is described in Revelation, or all of the above. And then finally, the unfolding of God's plan of redemption follows the order. What's the order of the covenants? And you have your options listed there. And so, again, thanks so much for checking in tonight and attending this session. I think we have a good rhythm here of working through these worksheet questions, and then just getting a sneak preview of the evaluation questions. I'm always here to help you. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me or message me through the course system, or give me a call. I'm here to help you, to come alongside you, so you can get the most out of your course. And do you have any questions at this time before we wrap it up tonight?
I have a question. Week 2, because I've been going back looking at our notes that you had sent me. Week 4 is applied. The second part is just like week 2, right? It's got 2 parts to it.
Okay, I think I understood your question. Can you ask it again?
On the applied, the journal entry, when we're doing the answering the questions, what caught your eye and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is it 2 sections to that one this week?
Oh, good question. Thanks. I understand now. So, so the Bible passages from this week's reading are 2 Samuel chapters 5 and 6. So you'll have a section for that, and then Nehemiah chapters 1 and 2. So you'll have another section there. So two short sections this week.
So you really just after you answer one question for one section of, one verse section, then you're going to go back and re-answer them for the next one. That's what you're saying?
Right. You should have 2 journal entries.
Okay.
Yeah, you should have two major journal entries. So respond to the questions for the Samuel passage, for the Samuel reading, and then respond to the same questions for the Nehemiah reading.
That's why I messed up on this too, because I just answered what I read and thought that I was supposed to be done.
Yeah. And here you can see the example, here's an example of below from Genesis. So but here we're just there's two sections, not 4 like the example gives. So
yeah.
Good.
Okay, so I know it won't be the points I would get as far as that week, but could I go back and answer the second part on week 2 and just send that to you too?
That's a good question. Why don't we have why don't you send me a message, and I'll be happy to respond to your message on that. Okay, does that sound good?
Okay, that's fine.
Good. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. I did send a message to you and I guess maybe you hadn't seen it yet. I'm Sylvia.
Oh, do you have
and
a
I
message
sent a
for
message.
me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I was 3.
Okay, I will
You'll
respond to your message. You bet.
Okay. But this is the first time that I was able to get into the Zoom thing, and now I'm beginning to understand how it goes, and and I'll know more about it the next time I do it.
Okay.
It took me forever to get into what we were doing. I finally got back to it. I went in too early because my time is earlier than yours, and I guess that's why. Then when I come back to it, I was late.
Okay. Okay. Real good. Real good. Yep, I will respond to your message.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right. Hey, thanks to you ladies for checking in tonight, and for those of you who will watch this later this week, thanks for hanging in there. There were a lot of questions tonight. We covered a lot of territory. Normally we only have 1 chapter's worth of questions, and so tonight we had 2, and it was good to go through it. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. But why don't I close us in a word of prayer tonight, and then I will say goodbye. Lord, thanks for this class. Thanks for these students. And I just pray your blessing upon them tonight and this week as they balance the realities at home, the realities of work, and the realities of school. And they need an extra measure of your grace, and they need more of your Holy Spirit. And so I just pray, Father, that you would pour your Spirit out in abundance upon them. Give them the energy, give them the wisdom, give them the strength and endurance to finish well. It's like each course is a 6-week sprint, and they have to start fast and they have to finish fast, God. And so I pray that everything that they learn, that they would soak in like a sponge, Lord, and just allow your word to dwell richly within them, that you would speak to them through your word and by your Spirit, and you would meet their every need and at this time. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your Spirit at work within us. And I pray these things in the strong name of Jesus. Amen. Thanks so much. Have a great, great week. Take care.
All right.
Okay. Goodbye.
See you later.